It's been all of 8 days since I had a video out showing our garden here in Northern Virginia, Zone 7B, and things have really changed. This is the time of year where every day you walk outside and something wonderful and new is happening. The new dawn roses that are climbing over the front porch have really begun their spectacular show. The clematis is blooming along the fence, probably about half a dozen open blooms and just covered with buds. On the right corner of the house is the mountain laurel. And on the left, just beyond the walkway there, is the lupine. And there's our, again on the left, our rose. And last week, this was an amazing view of the horse chestnut tree. And if you saw last week's video, you know it looked spectacular. Now we're at the tail end and it's losing its blossoms. So it's time for the tree to be trimmed a little bit now. Now as we walk over here by the walkway, little butterfly on the spiderwort. And last week this rose was covered in blossoms. It still has some blossoms, but not as spectacular as last week. And there are our pots with Supertunia Bordeaux and some Plectranthus and little coleus, and many more blossoms coming out just in 8 days. And more of the spiderwort. Something new blooming here. This is mock orange. One of those flowers I remember from childhood. My mother had one in the yard and it smelled spectacular. So beautiful and fragrant. This one looks beautiful, but it doesn't have the fragrance that I remember from childhood. And then over in this corner of the yard, this is the Baptisia. Some people call this one false indigo with its purple color. I'm going to go into my neighbor's yard a little bit here because she has the most spectacular view over her car of the mock orange. I think I'll cut some of that back and take it inside. Makes a pretty indoor plant. There's our walkway. The hardy geraniums are still blooming quite nicely. They put on a good show for quite a bit of time. And you can see the lupine. Lupine is one of my favorite flowers. I guess it's a sentimental attachment from Colorado because in the Colorado mountains they grow wild by the side of the road, just fields of them, and they're just beautiful. And they are very difficult to grow here. According to the nursery that I go to, nobody had ever seen them bloom in someone's ground, and it took a good 6 or 7 years for this. Well, it's about 5, well, I guess I'd say 5 years. A good 5 years for this to set well enough to actually get blooms. Last year was the first year it had blooms. These were seeds that I brought from Colorado. Now, I had bought lupine here and tried to transplant them, and they just died. I mean, they were pretty when I stuck them in the ground, but they were treated more like annuals. But I am letting this, you probably say, why doesn't she just deadhead her plant? I am letting this completely go to seed, and I will take the seeds and continue to sow them around my yard, and hopefully I will get a better stand, an even bigger stand of these spectacular lupines. Classic flower in an English cottage garden. This airy plant, that's a fennel, which I think looks really pretty with the roses, the climbing roses. Now beyond the roses here, that's the mountain laurel. Now I'm going to take you over to have a closer look at it because these are such an incredibly cute little flower. I just ran into a bush there. You can see them open now, but in the middle of that, when you can see the buds that have not opened yet, these funny little star-shaped buds that slowly open up and create this beautiful cluster. I mean, how can you not love that plant? Just so interesting and spectacular. And it blooms after the azaleas. Oh, look, there's a long little azalea in there. But that same color, but a different kind of plant. Oh, and this is just such a pretty view down the side. Deep shade garden with ivies and ferns. So now there are more spiderwort in here. There's a white color, that pale purple color. Yes, I've seen the magenta ones. Here's an iris that my husband stepped on. He was doing something to take care of the house, so I can't fuss too much. But he stepped on the iris, so it's kind of flopping down in there. Pretty view down the path. So when you're leaving my house, you can walk down the path here. And on the left, see it's a holly, not a boxwood. Looks kind of like a boxwood, but it's actually a holly. And the hardy geranium, and on the right hand side the roses and the fennel and a couple of little columbines that are still hanging on. And what's coming up here, these will be some lilies, and the yew here stays green all year long, but this time of year it sends out kind of a lime colored new growth, which is really pretty. And of course, there's the lupine from this angle. And some pencil hollies with variegated small-leafed hosta. Now growing here next to the pathway, this is meadow rue, which is more of a wildflower. Kind of has a green flower on it, greenish yellowish flower, but back behind it, that's the oak leaf hydrangea, which just about the same time this meadow rue quits blooming, the oak leaf hydrangea will start to bloom. Some butterfly bush that will give us color later. Now over here, this is the little blue star-shaped flower is Amsonia. And it was kind of small when we bought the house 8 years ago, but it continues to get a little bit bigger every year. It's our acanthus, which we'll have in a month or so. He'll have some interesting blooms on him. Right there under the fountain are the ferns. Last week I showed you all of the fiddleheads coming off of the fern that's in this pot on the right. And I promised you it was going to be crazy, and there it is. This is an autumn fern, I think. Loads of new fronds and fresh batch coming in the pot on the left, and they love the splash coming off of the fountain. The coral bells here are still blooming. The two different colors of spiderwort. There were peonies here last week, and the peonies are pretty well spent. Now, last week, these were beautiful azaleas, and now they are spent. And you can see how the individual flowers are kind of messy looking and papery. The thing about having a shade garden that is full of perennials is it's kind of like having a party. A really, really big, spectacular party that's great fun to have, but when it's over, you have to clean up. And this week has been a lot about cleaning up. I go in and I'll show you over here. I've finished cleaning up this azalea. Well, you can see a little bit on it. A few little funny looking blooms on, but I pulled them off and it looks a lot neater. The other thing that I've had to pull out, there's our bird singing a song. We had fabulous daffodils back here, and that had to be pulled out. That's such a mess, so I had to clean up after those parties. And here is the Virginia sweet spire. It starts off, this is what the little bud looks like, and then it opens up to these wonderful fluffy spires. That's where it gets its name, the sweet spire. And it also has beautiful color in the fall, beautiful fall color. Very easy to grow, and it freely seeds in my yard, so I kind of have to keep an eye on it. The Carolina allspice still has some blossoms on it, but they are beginning to make the little nuts that grow on it. I don't know what to call them, but they look kind of like nuts when they're done. That's what the flower turns into, this little kind of hard black thing. Still blooming back here is this rose. It's our mophead hydrangea beneath that noble rose, and it is covered with blossoms. So probably next week's tour, or the week after that, this will be looking very spectacular. And here are the yellow irises, which are really looking pretty right now. Now I have replanted my pots here. I had coleus in them because they're really good in the shade, but I bought a flat of 8 at Costco, and half of them did not survive, so I had to dig them all out to take them back. And so I've put some New Guinea patience, which is, the tag says full sun, but they actually, for me, do pretty well in our part shade. And the Bible that I use is Glorious Shade Gardening, I think. I'll put in a picture of the book. This is, in my opinion, the best book on shade gardening. And she actually says they can do well with some part shade. And the coleus was back here on this little window box on the shed, and it had to be replanted. And I ended up getting a fern. I don't know if you can see that in there, but my Mother's Day gift, a fern. And this is my favorite little variety of fern. It's called a tassel fern. And you can look down on the stems. The stems are decidedly tasseled, kind of this fuzzy stem. And these grow really well in very deep shade. And the thing that I like even more is they look like this all winter long. So I cannot more highly recommend tassel fern. We put that back in here with the hostas and again our replanted little trough here with some impatiens. We'll see how well we do, because this is more shade than I would have wanted. This was my original tassel fern. He's back here. I got a lot of furniture back here because of my husband's project. It's back here by the little back door that comes off of our bedroom. And he has been in this little spot here for probably 5 years. And it's just my favorite fern. Looks like that all winter. And I put a little begonia here in a fun little pot, and it shows very nicely from inside the house. I like that. Now remember when I mentioned having a garden like this is like having a party constantly. You always have to clean up after the party. So you can see I've cleaned up here, I've not cleaned up there. So you can see this azalea still needs some work, but I just go out and do it for as long as I can stand and then go off and do something else more interesting. And I've been pulling out the daffodil leaves. This was just covered with floppy leaves that were spent. These that haven't come out yet were the snowflakes. So you can't pull it all out at once. You kind of have to wait for each thing to go. So it's like cleaning up after a series of parties. Now, in case you're wondering how bad it gets. Okay, here's the mess. Those 3 bags are completely full of mess from the yard, and so is that green organics bin, and I still have another bag in the front. And the rest of this mess, this is my husband's project alongside to the right of our storage shed, and that's going to create space to hold our trash can. So we'll do a video on that, on how he lays it and what a mess it is. But in the meantime, I have a messy yard. My husband is working on his project underneath these trees. I think that looks like a rather idyllic place to work. He's creating a gate to go in front of our trash cans so we won't have to look at them. Well, I hope you've enjoyed seeing our garden. It is, I think, the 17th, 18th maybe of May, so mid-May. And you can see my azalea that needs some cleaning there. And we've enjoyed having you along. If you've enjoyed the tour of the garden, be sure to give us a thumbs up. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.